grading every Group C Pro League team based on their results. Let's go, and let's start with Cyclone. I think, listen, they beat Imperial, they beat M80, competitive loss against Navi, loss against Fanatic, and then a sad loss against 9Z in the decider. But I'm doing this relative to expectations, and so for me, Cyclone have to get an A. They're coming from a region where it's not that easy to practice, to gain experience. I think Advent as their in-game leader gets them playing a solid style, solid structured CS. They had the third highest trade percentage in this group, so a lot of trade frags, and actually the second highest flash assists as well. So overall, the fundamentals actually looked pretty solid for this team. The issues were, Kaze was pretty bad on the AWP, and having a bad AWPer at the top tier level of Counter-Strike makes such a big difference. I think that was an issue. Advent is also going to be a very bad fragger. I'm sorry, he just is. And I think that's fine. I think they need to get this solid structured style to get these players experience. But I don't know if Advent is good enough fragging-wise at the top level to take this team to a real competitor. And then Mercury looks great. This guy genuinely looks like he has a lot of talent. I hope we get to see the region progressing in the future and we get to see more out of Mercury. But for now, they feel like a team that will show up. They'll be decent. They'll do a bit of damage, but they won't really come through a group so far, at least from what I've seen. Let's move on to the next team, Navi. They didn't drop a map here. They got wins over a settled FaZe team, Apex, and Cyclone. And so for that reason, I'm giving them the S tier. What more could they have done here? They didn't drop a map, as I said. Bit was playing great, so was Simple. These were two players that weren't actually playing that well earlier in the season. Alexi has proven he's a good fragger for an IGL. He looked solid individually. And just the team also looked pretty solid. They had the highest trade percentage here in this group, the second highest flash assists. I don't think it's 100% there yet, but they look much more on the same page than I was expecting at this point. And that's despite Alexi B, in my opinion, having a lot of difficult things he's had to deal with on this team. I mean, firstly, there's massive pressure taking Navi international for the first time. That's not an easy position to be in. Navi have always been the best CIS team, the best Eastern European team. They've always been a very, very good squad because of that. And taking them international, you keep those same expectations, but you have a lot of issues and you have a lot of pressure from that community. Also, Alexi just had a lot of pressure in general because he keeps getting these top IGL spots that people aren't convinced by him. Furthermore, Ima and JL both played no tier 1 tournaments ever before the major, before that Blast Paris major. These are not experienced players he's getting to work with. You've also got Simple and Bit having to com in English. I know Simple's done that before, but trust me, you can tell in interviews he's not as quick. He's not 100% straight there in English. No player's going to be. So you'd expect a drop-off from those guys, but they actually played great here. And I think the main thing is he had no core roster to build from. A lot of times you come into a team, you've already got 3 players who are there that have stuck together as the core of the squad, that have some chemistry, that have a similar idea and understanding on how to play the game. He did not have that. And normally that is a very hard thing to instill into a team this quickly. So to get the team to this decent level within under 3 months, I actually think that's very impressive from Alexi. I'm really glad it's working out for him because I think this would have been his last chance on a top team. But so far it is looking solid. I will admit, we still need to see them on the big stages. We still need to see them in the big moments. But I think it's a really positive sign how well they've done here. There are some drawbacks. The two I want to point out. Firstly, Ima, I think, is very uncomfortable with the team atmosphere. I'm hoping that will get better, but you can tell that they're a very intense team. Simple is always someone who's just going to say what he thinks straight away. I don't think Ima likes being in that sort of environment, and I think he's not got the personality to just kind of ride it off and be happy-go-lucky like JL. So I think that will affect his performances. I hope that improves going forwards. And secondly, okay, there is one stat that is maybe a little wild from this group stage. They won 48% of rounds where they started in a 4v5. That is nowhere near the normal levels you expect. You normally expect like 30% maybe. To win nearly half of the rounds where you're a man down is wild. That won't happen again. That won't happen consistently. So you can temper things slightly. But overall, I really think Alexi deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. I'll probably make another video about that, honestly. I think there's so much to dive into on just the Alexi topic. But let's move on to our next team, which is going to be Fanatic, who beat 9Z. They had they beat Imperial in a close win to start things off. They beat Cyclone. They beat Apex, but they did take that loss against FaZe. Is that right? I'm pretty sure that's right. I have to go double check for some reason. Yeah, that is right. Okay, I gotta make sure. I gotta make sure I got this down right. I think overall, listen, they came out in third. Fairly new roster. I'm also giving them an A. I think they were pretty solid here. Team play, I wasn't as convinced by, but their nade stats were pretty good at this event. I think Mezzy has shown that he's not going to have any issues going from IGL back to Star Fragger, which is a great sign. He's so good in the late round and as a trade fragger. And you can tell he's someone who's very methodical about how he thinks about the game. He's weirdly kind of done the opposite of BlameF at the same time. BlameF's just become an IGL. Mezzy's gone from IGL to star player, and they have very similar roles. But it looks like he's having no problems adjusting, which is great. I also think Afro looks solid. I think he will turn into a pretty good AWPer at Tier 1, which is a great sign because that's something they were maybe lacking a little bit in the past. I do think the only thing holding this team back, certainly at this stage, Dexter's fragging was real bad. And that's something that I think he can improve slightly. But also, Roy was a little shaky. Roy had some off maps, and he can be the X factor and the opener for this team a lot of rounds. If he can figure his game out, I think this Fnatic team can go far. For now, it is still an A, as it is still a pretty new roster. I think they can be happy with this, and it's a sign of progression going forwards, although that opening game was crazy close, crazy intense. I am glad they pulled through that, because this maybe could have been a whole different result if they lost that opening game. Who knows what happens, but they got through it, and they get an A from me. Let's move on to our next team, Imperial. This one pains me, man, because they started out so promising. They started out looking so good. They were able to beat 9Z. They took that crazy close loss I was talking about against Fnatic, and a close loss against Apex as well, and then a loss against Cyclone. And listen, even though a lot of these games were close and they showed promise, they have to get a C. I think the overall results are really a little disappointing. It's an okay result just because of the performances they showed. And there were some good signs. Listen, Phelps genuinely looks like he's back, which I don't know how that happened. It came out of nowhere. He was in terrible form leading up to this event, and he ends as their highest rated player by far, and that is fantastic. They need players like Phelps to be delivering for them. Overall, though, this is a group they should have been able to compete in. They maybe should have even been able to get out in if they were on their best game, and they just struggled to convert in the biggest moments, and that was a real shame. I do think Vinny as an IGL looks pretty decent. I think you've got good experience. Bolt's played well. Henny was maybe a little shaky as the AWPer, but like he has those big moments. He still delivers that impact at the right times, even if his fragging wasn't great. But they just struggled to get it over the line, and I can only go off the results. I don't care if you look promising and lose. And for a team that maybe could have been able to get out of this group, like another team from the region that we'll get onto later, I think I have to give them a C. It's probably a high C, but it is still a C from me. Let's move on to FaZe. I think a pretty big talking point from this group. They were able to beat 9Z. They were able to beat Fnatic. They obviously did lose against Navi and came out in second. This team is so hard to get a grasp on right now. I'm going to give them a B. I think this was okay. I think this was fine. I think they would have liked to be more competitive against Navi, and especially considering on Nuke, they went 13-9 up on their CT side, and they lost every single round from that point. That was a shame. That was a real shame for me. That's why I can't give them much higher than this. This might even be a low B from me. And they did lose a lot of clutches in that game. They lost a couple of clutches. They won more opening kills. They probably should have won that Nuke map against Navi the majority of the time. It's just weird right now with FaZe. Like, no one's doing that badly, but no one's doing, like, that great. I mean, Rops is putting up good numbers. Brokey still looks solid. Twists and Rain, also fine numbers here. Carrigan, as always, below the rest of them. But I don't know, their energy just feels a bit off. It doesn't feel like they're fully on their A game. It doesn't feel like they're fully at their best. It hasn't felt like that for a while. But it also doesn't feel like that there's an obvious move to make with this team. And the question to me is this a team that's going to get revigorated, rejuvenated when Counter-Strike 2 comes around? Or do we need to rip the Band-Aid off now and just make a change just to get some energy back into the team? Because they kind of feel like they're a little comfortable right now. They kind of feel like they're sort of sailing along, doing what they need to do. But that's not what I want from this lineup. That's not what I want from this team. I want this lineup to be competing for trophies. I want them hungry. They don't look hungry right now. I'll still give them a B. This was fine. They made it through the group. But I'd be very curious to see how this roster does going forwards, because they have been at this level for a while where I cannot criticize, I cannot complain, but it does just feel a little underwhelming, doesn't it? There's not one individual that's really struggling. There's not one obvious move to make. Everyone just feels a little below what they should be. And that's a concerning position to be in. That's kind of the hardest position to be in sometimes, when you don't make a move for a while and you slowly slip down the pecking order until you realize, oh crap, we're actually not a great team anymore, and we missed our opportunity to make that move. So, tough spot for FaZe. I'd love to hear what you guys think about them right now, but for me, a low B. They just about did enough here. M80, the American team coming in here. You guys might not count much of this team. They lost every single map here at Pro League. I'm still going to give them a low C, because I think they had pretty low expectations and should have had low expectations. They were probably least favorites to do anything in this group. And man, it feels harsh, because like, they were having close maps against Apex. They had a close map against Cyclone and 9Z. They were very close series as well. But like, when you don't win a map, if anything, giving you a C might be being a little nice to you. But I think compared to the expectations, it was all right. Swisher still looks very promising. I think this guy's got a big future, genuinely. He's got to be next up from NA. He has to be the next player. If one of the top orgs is looking for a player to go with, Swisher has to be the guy. I like Manx as an in-game leader. I thought he brought some of that Danish camaraderie and togetherness and tricky strats to this team as the IGL. But then you've got Morps, who has potential, but was definitely quite inconsistent. And then you've got Wolfie and Rek, who just didn't look good enough for this level, sadly. At least at this event. Maybe there's time to develop, but I've seen Wolfie a long time. I don't think he's good enough as an AWPer to compete at the top level. I think he just misses too many shots, simply put. And Rek, kind of, I felt like played a little scared at times. Maybe that will improve, but yeah, M80, low C. I mean, listen, lads, you didn't win a map. I'm sorry. I can't give you much more than that, even though there were some promising signs. Swisher especially, really one to watch. Intelligent, hardworking player. Want to see more from him. Let's move on to Apex. They beat M80, but they took that close loss against Imperial. They lost against Navi. Oh, sorry, they beat Imperial in that close game. They beat Imperial in that close game, but then they did lose against Navi, Fanatic, and 9Z. And for me, Apex have to get an F. I know it seems harsh, but compared to expectations, I think they are the team that failed this group. You just can't lose against 9Z in that lower bracket. And more importantly, you can't lose and it be quite convincing. It wasn't even close. They didn't get double digits on either map. They got 2-0'd. That's not good enough for Apex, a team who should have looked at this group and said, we're one of the favorites to make it through. Outside of Navi, FaZe, and Fanatic, they were the next team that everyone had on their list. I just feel like the firepower is not good enough on this team. I think Jacob's good. I think he can still be on a really good team. Nork is okay on the AWP. He doesn't really excite me personally. I know some people rate him higher, but I think he's pretty mediocre. Sassanito is a new addition, so I'll give him a little time, but he's so inconsistent. This guy will either win you the round or lose you the round a lot of the time, and that's always a little bit of a scary player to have, but it can work if you've got a good roster around him. I do like Stiko as a player and as a person. He's a very hard worker. He's very thoughtful. But just as an individual, he is subpar. He's poor at this level. And even though I like Stiko and I think he is a really smart guy, he's quite creative. He comes up with new ideas a lot of the time. I don't know if he's good enough to be on a team that wants to compete at the top level, however smart he is. And then Kixan, I mean, I think he's doing an okay job, but nothing spectacular. Yeah, they should be making it through this group, or at least to the final qualification game in that lower bracket. But instead, they go out, and for that reason, I have to give them an F. I would expect them to make it through. They actually didn't even make it to that final qualification matchup, so a little disappointing. I just think Apex need that little bit more firepower on this team. Let's switch over to the final squad. 9Z, They lost against FaZe, but they were able to come back in this one. They were able to beat M80 in a close game. They beat Apex. They beat Cyclone. And that's also after losing against Imperial and going straight to the lower bracket. And you know what? They need to get an A. They really do. I thought they were done for, especially that loss against Imperial. Like, sure, you lose against FaZe. You play them close on Nuke. That's all right. But they had to bounce back from the lower bracket. And especially that game against Imperial, they just didn't look themselves. Like, team play and timings were off. Their individuals just did not look that good. I thought they were done for, but they somehow get a really close win against M80. They beat Apex. They beat Cyclone. They make it through. They deserve an A for that. They were not expected to make it through this group. I do think that there are some positives, especially DGT. His snappy aim looks very good. I think Try was solid on the AWP. David stepped up in some big moments. This is a fairly settled team, so maybe they are a team that you could say that they have some pedigree. They maybe had some chance to make it through here. But I was not expecting them to do it, to be honest. I didn't think coming into this they'd been good enough regionally to prove that they can make it through. But fair play. Impressive result. I think they didn't wow me much with their CS, honestly. But I think coupled with some of the other teams underperforming and them playing just that little bit better, they make it through. I think they've got to be very happy with that. And yeah, listen, considering they make it through and Imperial don't, they've got to be delighted. So those are my final ratings, my gradings. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Navi up there, FaZe in the middle, Apex F. It feels harsh, but what can I do? They should have made it through. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you next time.